Washington pushes his chair back sharply. The sound grates against the wooden floor. He rises and steps quickly toward the exit door. John Hancock, President of the Congress, bangs his gavel hard. "Colonel Washington." "Control yourself, sir. We have not yet ratified the nomination." Washington stops short of the door. He turns back, his tall frame rigid. "Mr. President, I beg the Congress not to consider me. I lack the competence for this immense command." Adams steps away from the podium. "Sir, modesty is not a necessity in war. The British fleet is now sailing toward Boston. We require a leader who commands instant respect, not a hesitant delegate." "I am a planter, gentlemen. My experience is limited to small colonial regiments," Washington argues, walking back toward the center table. "This is an army of 13 disparate militias. The command is too vast for my limited abilities. I will fail to unify them." Edward Rutledge of South Carolina stands quickly. "Colonel, our militias will not obey a general from the North. They will not answer to an army raised solely in Massachusetts. Only a Virginian of your stature can hold the Union together. The Union is built on political consensus, not military dictatorship," Washington insists. "There are men here with superior strategic minds. I urge you to look elsewhere." Samuel Adams rises from his seat. "Sir, we are past strategy. We are at survival. Your reputation is the only authority that can unify these armed farmers. Your humility is proof of your character, but the time for debate is over." Hancock slides a parchment document across the table. He dips his quill and signs the document with a decisive flourish. The vote is concluded. It is unanimous. "We have elected you Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army." Washington looks at the signed commission. He holds his hands out, palms up. "I must state for the record that should any ill fortune befall this army, should the colonies collapse into factional fighting, I wish it remembered that I disclaimed all pretense to success. I warned you I would prove inadequate." "We accept your disclaimer, General," Hancock states. "The Congress shoulders the risk of failure, provided you shoulder the burden of command." Hancock pushes the commission across the table toward Washington. Roger Sherman calls out from the back of the room. "General, the question of salary must be settled immediately. The Congress has authorized payment of £6,000 per annum for your immense service." Washington finally picks up the commission. He immediately finds the section detailing the salary, rips that corner off the parchment, and sets the fragment on fire in the nearest candle flame. The paper curls, blackens quickly, and falls to ash on the table. "No salary will be accepted," Washington confirms. He looks at the smoking fragment. "I will accept no payment that attaches personal profit to this." Immense power. Power must not be profitable. Sherman steps into the aisle. "Sir, you must receive a stipend. Every general deserves compensation for his time and risk. You must live. I demand only that Congress keep an exact accounting of every shilling spent for my military necessities," Washington insists, his voice intense and unyielding. "The ledger must be reviewed by this body every month. No personal gain must ever be tied to the command of this army. The cause must remain pure duty." Benjamin Franklin leans forward, nodding slowly. "A general who refuses pay. An excellent precedent for a republic, sir." Washington looks directly at Hancock, the signed commission now folded in his hands. "I accept this commission only on one explicit condition. The sword must always be subservient to the civil power." He walks to the edge of the table, looking down at the assembled delegates. "I will not act outside the explicit direction of this body. The Army will not threaten the people's representatives. I command only by your direct leave, never by my own will." Rutledge speaks again. "Sir, the necessities of war may force you to make decisions quickly. Will you hesitate if the survival of the Army requires speed? I will not usurp the authority of the people's voice for the sake of temporary efficiency." Washington states, "If you require a king, you have nominated the wrong man. I am a servant of the Congress." Hancock pounds the gavel decisively. "The Congress accepts those terms, sir. The Army is yours. You are Commander-in-Chief." Washington salutes Hancock. He tucks the commission into the belt of his uniform. He turns and walks toward the door, his stride long and purposeful. He pauses at the exit, looking back at the delegates. "Where does the Army wait?" Washington asks. Hancock points a rigid finger toward the northeast. Cambridge, Massachusetts. Godspeed, General. Washington walks out the door. The delegates stare at the small black pile of ash on the table where the salary had been. General Charles Lee bursts into Washington's tent. He throws a stack of crumpled patrol reports onto the rough-hewn campaign desk. Sir, 150 new desertions last night. The men are leaving their posts simply to find food and warmth, Lee states, his voice ragged with frustration. The supply lines are not just slow, they are non-existent. Washington stands by a small, smoky stove, carefully polishing his boots. The scarcity is known, Charles. I have sent 3 dispatches to Congress this week. We must hold the line until their response arrives. The response will be worthless paper currency that no farmer will accept, Lee shouts, walking to the desk and slamming his fist down. The profiteers in Pennsylvania seize our supplies and sell the flour to the British for gold. Congress writes letters while our army starves to death. Lee leans over the desk, his voice dropping to a fierce whisper. There's only one way to survive this winter. You must take the authority now. Washington stops polishing his boots. He places the brush down slowly on the desk. I hold no authority that is not explicitly granted by the civil power in Philadelphia. The civil power is incompetent. They are too slow. They cannot feed this army, but you can, Lee insists, his eyes wild. Issue an immediate singular command. Use the army to seize every mill, every storehouse, and every fat cow from here to the Hudson River. Feed the men, damn the law of the Congress. Washington walks slowly to the table. He stands directly facing Lee. You propose that I become a dictator, that I use military force against the very citizens whose property we are sworn to protect. I propose we win the war, Lee screams. We cannot fight a foreign tyranny if we allow ourselves to be defeated by domestic lawlessness and starvation. Your soldiers' lives depend on your immediate unilateral action. The freedom of this country depends on our unwavering obedience to the law. Washington replies, his voice low and intense. If I seize power to save the army, I have destroyed the republic before it is born. The end does not justify the means. Colonel Sterling enters the tent, saluting stiffly. Sir, a detail of men from the Maryland line is refusing duty until they are issued shoes and full rations. They threaten to march home. Lee points a trembling finger at Sterling. There, see the mutiny? Order them arrested, General, and then order the seizure of food before the entire camp dissolves. Order the men to return to their posts, then inform them that their general will share their meager rations until the supply wagons arrive. Washington commands Sterling. No seizure, no arrest. Lee stares at Washington, shaking his head in disbelief. You have the power, sir. The entire army is loyal only to you. Congress is distant. You could take absolute control and save them all from freezing. Washington picks up his boot and resumes polishing. The men follow me because I am loyal to the cause of liberty. That loyalty is bound by the authority of the people's representatives. He looks up at Lee, his gaze unwavering. The moment I place my own will above the civil law, I become the very tyrant we are fighting to escape. We will endure this suffering before we endure the rule of a general. Lee turns away abruptly, grabbing his coat. Then God help us, sir, because we will starve and freeze to death waiting for a vote in Philadelphia. Washington watches him leave. He continues polishing the boot until it gleams in the dim light. General Mifflin throws a sheaf of reports onto the wooden barrel serving as Washington's desk. The force of the action makes the rough-hewn barrel slide several inches on the frozen floor. Sir, the medical reports are beyond tragic, Mifflin states, his voice a strained rasp. We have 4,000 men unfit for duty. They are dying. The doctors have no bandages, no powder, and no food to give them but salted hide. Washington stands over a large campaign map spread across a cot. He places a copper marker onto the map, indicating a gap in the defensive line. The severity is known, General. I have transmitted all details and demands to the Congress. We wait for their action. Their action is worthless paper and endless debate, Mifflin argues, stepping close to Washington. The farmers of Bucks County hold 40,000 bushels of grain within 12 miles of this position. They refuse to sell to us. They demand specie which we do not possess. Washington turns from the map, his movement slow and deliberate. The civil government of Pennsylvania has made its law regarding commerce and currency. We are sworn to uphold the laws of the state. Mifflin steps forward, his breathing heavy. I propose we suspend the civil law. We will march the 4th Brigade tomorrow. We will seize the necessary flour and meat. The survival of this army is the supreme law right now. We cannot allow the army to dissolve while the civil government starves us. You propose a declaration of martial law, Washington states, his voice flat. He walks past Mifflin and stands near the single smoking stove. You suggest we use the sword to commit armed robbery against the citizens we are sworn to protect. I suggest we keep the instrument of liberty alive, Mifflin shouts, his voice rising in desperation. If this army ceases to exist, the war is lost. The Republic is a philosophy, but your soldiers are freezing and starving. Use the power the army grants you, General. Order the seizure. A silence descends, broken only by the crackle of wood in the stove. Washington picks up a piece of kindling and examines the grain of the wood. If I seize power to feed the army, Washington finally says, his voice controlled and dangerously quiet, then I have already committed treason against the principle we established in Annapolis. The usurpation of authority begins with the argument of necessity. You are choosing paper law over breathing men, Mifflin accuses, his voice cracking with emotion. You are sacrificing the lives of your soldiers to protect the sanctity of a government that has abandoned them to rot. Washington looks directly at Mifflin. If I break the civil law now, when the need is desperate, what reason will I have not to break it when the danger is past? I will have established a precedent for military tyranny in this place. A starving man may steal bread, but a general cannot steal the authority of his nation. Marquis de Lafayette enters the cabin. He stands near the door. General, the desperation is visible. The men see the nearby prosperity. The temptation to mutiny is strong. The desperate act is very close. Washington walks to the barrel desk and picks up a quill. He dips it in the inkwell. Write your report, General Mifflin. State exactly what you propose. Martial law, suspension of state authority, and the forced seizure of civilian property. I will read it, sign it, and transmit it to Congress myself. Mifflin stares, rigid with shock. You will sign the warrant for your own court-martial? I will sign the document that proves my refusal to fail in principle, Habitant. Washington corrects him. The failure rests with Congress, not with the Army's discipline. But I will not allow the Army to become an enemy of the people. Washington looks directly at Mifflin, his gaze steady and unwavering. Tell the command structure this. I will take only the rations allotted to the common soldier. I will not sleep in a softer bed, or eat better bread, or wear warmer clothes than the last man in the trench. He lays the quill down. I refuse to use the Army to subvert the authority that created it. The moment I break the civil law to save myself, the Republic dies. My personal suffering is my pledge of loyalty to the civil government. Mifflin stands for a long moment, then turns and walks out. The reports remain stacked neatly on the barrel desk. Washington returns to the map, placing his hand flat on the diagram of the encampment. Better we suffer, General, than forfeit the principle that makes us free. A large meeting tent is pitched silently on the Newburgh campgrounds. Senior officers, including General Horatio Gates, are gathered inside. The air is tense and heavy. Gates stands near the entrance, addressing the assembled men. Congress ignores us. 8 years of service, 8 years of fighting, and they reward us with worthless paper bonds, Gates states, his voice low and angry. They leave us to beg. We have been betrayed. A low collective murmur of agreement sweeps through the officers. Several men stamp their boots on the cold earth floor. Colonel Nicholas stands up. He holds a folded, thick parchment in his hand. Gentlemen, the time for petitions is over. We need a strong hand to force Congress to honor its debt. We need a government that can actually govern. Gates steps back, gesturing toward Nicola. The time for meek requests has passed. We require an ultimatum. We require a firm, permanent leader. Nicola looks down at the parchment. He raises his head. We propose that General Washington be declared the supreme head of the nation, a king in all but name. Only he can compel the justice we are owed. A loud, sudden sound outside the tent interrupts the proceedings. The tent flap rips open. Washington stands in the entrance, his face grave. He was not invited. The plotting stops instantly. The officers fall silent. Many drop their heads, unable to meet his gaze. Washington walks to the central table. He pulls out a crumpled, anonymous circular letter from his coat pocket, the document urging the officers to mutiny. He slams the letter onto the table. "Gentlemen, what is this darkness I find here?" Washington asks. His voice is quiet, but it dominates the tent. "Is this the final reward for 8 years of shared suffering and sacrifice?" He picks up the letter and reads a portion detailing the plot against Congress. "You contemplate treason against the sovereignty of the United States. You seek to overthrow the very government that you fought and bled to establish." Nicholas steps forward, desperate. "Sir, we seek only what is due. Congress has abandoned us. We seek only your strong leadership to make this nation stable and just." Washington ignores him. He pulls a separate letter from his coat, a note of apology from Congress regarding the delay in pay. He squints, struggling to decipher the small text in the dim light. He reaches into his breast pocket and slowly pulls out a pair of spectacles. He puts them on. The simple, unexpected act of the powerful general revealing his human frailty silences the room completely. Washington speaks, his voice thick with emotion. "Gentlemen, you will permit me to put on my spectacles, for I have not only grown gray in your service, but I have almost grown blind as well." The tension breaks. Several officers turn away, wiping their eyes. Gates lowers his head, ashamed. Washington looks over the rims of the glasses at the faces of his officers. "Who is the man who would stain the honor of this army by seeking to make me a king? The man who would destroy the cause of liberty for which we have all sacrificed our fortunes?" He looks directly at Nicola. "Submit your grievances to Congress. Demand justice, but never, under any circumstances, threaten the civil authority with your swords." Washington removes the glasses, putting them away. He walks toward the exit. "We did not fight one king only to create another. You are the soldiers of the Republic. The sword obeys the law." He walks out. The officers remain, silent, staring at the empty space he occupied. The chamber in the Maryland State House in Annapolis is filled with delegates and observers. Thomas Mifflin, President of the Congress, sits on the elevated dais. The room waits, silent and expectant. Washington enters the room. He is dressed in his full, pristine military uniform. He walks to the center, holding the signed parchment, his original commission as Commander-in-Chief. Mifflin rises from the dais. "General Washington, the Congress is prepared to receive your final address." Washington walks to the front table. He carefully removes his cocked hat and places it on the wood. He faces the assembly, the civilian representatives of the country he has just won. "Mr. President, the great events on which my resignation depended are at length finished," Washington states. His voice is measured, clear, and steady. "I have, with fidelity, executed the arduous task assigned to me." He holds up the parchment showing the document of his authority to all present. "I now resign with satisfaction the appointment I accepted with diffidence." A sound of rustling cloth and quiet exclamations rises from the gallery. A delegate, Mr. Paca, pushes his chair back suddenly. "Mr. President requests the general reconsider," Paca calls out. "The French and Spanish armies remain strong. The treaty is fragile. The army needs its general to guarantee the peace." Washington turns his head slightly toward Paca. "The army must now learn that the civil authority is its only guarantee. The sword must be sheathed." He walks directly to Mifflin on the dais. He kneels before the President of the Congress. "I here present my commission and take my leave of all the employments of public life," Washington says. He holds the document out, offering it to Mifflin. Mifflin reaches out and accepts the commission. The parchment passes from the military hand to the civilian hand. The moment of transfer hangs in the air. Charles Thompson, the Secretary of Congress, stands beside Mifflin holding a bound ledger. He speaks to the record. "The commission of George Washington is received by the Congress of the United States December 23, 1783. Washington rises. He stands before the assembly, instantly a private citizen. General Knox, positioned near the entrance, speaks out to the officers gathered there. Look at him, gentlemen. Look at what you fought for. Washington bows deeply to the representatives of the people. I submit to your directions and return to that esteemed country which I call home. James McHenry, a delegate, walks toward the table where Washington placed his hat. Sir, the men are already asking if you will return to politics. The country needs a unified leader for the new government. Washington pauses near the table. I seek the quiet life of a private citizen, sir. I have served the will of the people for 8 years. I am weary of public affairs. He picks up his hat. He moves toward the exit door, his head held high. No one follows him. Mifflin bangs the gavel. His hand shakes visibly against the wood. The general of our armies has resigned his command. He has voluntarily surrendered the power of the sword. Mr. McHenry calls out again to Washington's back. No man in the history of the world has ever done this, General. The power was yours to keep. Washington reaches the door. He turns one last time to face the entire assembly. He executes a final, respectful bow to the civil authority. He walks through the door, leaving the chamber in profound, defining silence. The great lesson is made. The final purpose of the commander is to become the citizen. The study at Mount Vernon is filled with quiet light. Washington is seated at his desk, wearing plain civilian clothes, examining the rotation schedule in his farm ledger. The door opens. Charles Thompson, Secretary of the Confederation Congress, enters. He bows deeply. General Washington, I have traveled from New York with a message from the newly elected government, Thompson states. Washington closes his ledger. He rises. I trust the new Constitution is in full force, sir. The country requires strength and unity after the ratification debates. Thompson holds out a sealed official letter. Sir, the electors have cast their votes unanimously. You have been elected the first president of the United States. Washington takes the letter. He breaks the seal and reads the formal notification. He walks to the window, his shoulders hunched. This call to duty is the most painful moment of my life, Washington says, his voice subdued. I thought I was done with public service. I thought my remaining days would be spent in the quiet of this farm. Sir, the nation demands your leadership now, Thompson insists. The government is fragile. The people will only trust the new system if you are at its head. The experiment will fail without you. Washington turns back to the desk. He picks up the letter again, his grip tight. They ask me to risk my reputation in a role I never sought. They ask me to exchange a life of sweet repose for an ocean of difficulties. General Knox enters the study, having followed Thompson from New York. Henry Knox, at your service, General. Every man I speak to, Federalist and Anti-Federalist alike, agrees. The new government is just a piece of parchment without your name attached to it. Duty calls louder than rest. Duty called me to the Army, and I resigned that power when the war was won, Washington counters. Now duty calls me to an untested civil authority, one that could consume my reputation and collapse into failure. Knox steps forward. Then let it be said that the country failed, but that Washington did not abandon it when the risk was greatest. Your sacrifice is the only bond holding these states together. Washington looks at the letter, then at Knox. I accept this appointment not out of ambition, but out of a sense of profound obligation to my country. He looks at Thompson. I must set a precedent for every man who follows me. The highest office must be accepted only out of duty, never out of desire for personal glory. Washington walks to his coat. He pulls it on. He stands ready for the journey north. When can you depart, General? Thompson asks. Washington glances once more at his desk, at the farm ledger lying open. Immediately, the voice of my country calls me from my retreat. The precedent of reluctant leadership begins now. He walks out the door, leaving his peaceful life behind for the second time. The executive residence in Philadelphia. The room is formal. Alexander Hamilton stands before President Washington, holding a detailed list of foreign threats and internal debts. Mr. President, the nation is deeply fractured, Hamilton states, his voice urgent. The French government is openly interfering with our ambassadors. The factions in the cabinet are tearing the government apart. We survived 2 terms only through your command. Washington signs the final treaty document on his desk and caps the inkwell. He pushes the chair back. The date for my departure is fixed, Alexander. The farewell address is being finalized. I will not seek a third term. You cannot leave now, Hamilton insists, walking to the desk and leaning over it. Who will command the necessary authority against the rising tides of anarchy? Mr. Adams commands no unity. Mr. Jefferson trusts the mob. The survival of the republic cannot depend upon the life of one man, Washington replies, rising to his full height. It must depend upon the law. Hamilton slams his hand flat on the desk. The circumstances demand you stay. We are a fledgling government. To leave now is to invite collapse and prove that our great experiment requires a permanent dictator. If I remain, I prove precisely that point, Washington counters, walking toward the fireplace. If I stay for a third term, I set the example that the presidency is a lifelong position. My successor will feel obligated to seek a fourth, and the title will become nothing more than a softer name for king. Henry Knox enters the room holding a newspaper with a headline demanding Washington remain in office. The entire Federalist Party begs you to stay, sir. Public opinion demands stability. Duty demands you secure the Union. Duty demands I secure the principle, Washington insists, turning to face Knox. The man who holds the power must demonstrate he is willing to walk away from it. The power belongs to the office, not to the person. Knox drops the newspaper onto a side table. You are sacrificing the stability of the present for the uncertainty of the future. Washington shakes his head. The principle is the only thing that lasts. Stability built upon the back of one indispensable man is no stability at all. He walks past Hamilton, stopping near a cabinet where his original commission is stored. I have done my part, Alexander. I established the authority of the office. Now I must establish the fragility of the individual within it. But the two-term limit is not law, Hamilton argues. It is merely tradition. You can disregard it for the nation's good. Then I will make the tradition law by my own action, Washington states. The voluntary surrender of power is the highest act of a citizen. I will not give future ambitious men the excuse that the great Washington stayed to rule until death. He opens the cabinet, touches the commission, and closes the door. Tell the people I am leaving. Tell them I am setting the final precedent of self-government. The chamber in the Executive Building in Philadelphia is packed with members of the new Congress and the assembled cabinet. It is a cold morning in March. Washington stands next to President-elect John Adams. The Chief Justice is prepared to administer the oath of office. Adams turns to Washington, his face tense. Sir, I am terrified to inherit the seat you established. The nation's stability is owed only to your presence. Washington places his hand briefly on Adams's shoulder. The stability rests with the Constitution, Mr. Adams, not with the man. You must let the office stand on its own authority. The Chief Justice administers the oath. Adams repeats the words, officially becoming the second President of the United States. Washington steps back immediately, creating a physical separation between the old and new authority. He is dressed in a plain black suit, having discarded all military and executive insignia. Timothy Pickering, the Secretary of State, steps forward as Adams concludes his address. He approaches Washington. Mr. President, sir, the Congress has prepared a resolution creating a special rank, General of the Armies Emeritus, for your continued nonpartisan consultation. Washington stops, looking directly at Pickering. I resigned the commission of general 9 years ago in Annapolis. I will not accept a shadow rank now. The civil power requires no permanent military advisor. Pickering continues, insistent. But the French situation is volatile. The cabinet requires your counsel and your final judgment on foreign affairs. We need your influence to stabilize the factions. The French situation is now the full responsibility of President Adams, Washington states. He glances at Adams, then back at Pickering. My counsel is only available to him as a private citizen. The power of the former office must vanish immediately upon the new man taking the oath. General Henry Knox approaches, holding his hat. Sir, a battalion of infantry waits outside the building. They wish to escort you in a final procession to Mount Vernon, a tribute to the nation's only true father. Washington turns and walks toward the main exit door. He refuses the offer without breaking his stride. I require no escort, Henry. The moment I leave this office, I am subject only to the laws of Virginia. The dignity of the presidency must not be confused with the pomp of a European monarchy. Knox walks quickly beside him. But the people expect ceremony. They expect a visible tribute to your service. Washington stops at the heavy door. He places his hand on the brass handle. The dignity is in the transition itself, Henry, not in the parade. A retiring president must not look like a king leaving his throne or a general retaining command. He looks back across the long hall at the assembled officials, who watch his every move in absolute silence. If I accept a guard or a title or a continuing role, I teach the next ambitious man that the office is something to be held on to, not something to be surrendered. He bows deeply to the hall. Gentlemen, farewell. He turns and opens the heavy door himself. He steps out onto the street, closing the door behind him. He does not look back at the seat of power or the assembled officials. President Adams walks to the window, watching Washington's figure recede down the street, alone, without guard or attendant. Pickering stands next to Adams, staring. He refused the final tribute. He refused all power. Adams places his hand on the window frame. He has established the highest authority possible, the power to walk away.